Good day! Today, I'll be discussing Chapter 2, Lesson 3, Ethnocentrism and Relativism. So let's get started! Let's define ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism is judging another culture solely by the values and standards of one's own culture. Ethnocentrism is a term anthropologists use to describe the opinion that one's way of life is natural or correct. Some would simply call it cultural ignorance. Ethnocentrism means that one may see his or her own culture as the correct way of living. For those who have not experienced other cultures indeed, it can be said to be ethnocentric if they feel that their lives are the most natural way of living. Some cultures may be similar or overlap in ideas or concepts. However, some people are incensed, shocked to experience differences they may encounter with individuals culturally different than themselves. In extreme cases, a group of individuals may see a large culture's way of life and consider it wrong. Because of this, the group may try to convert the other group to their own ways of living. Fearful war and genocide could be the devastating result if a group is unwilling to change their ways of living. Ethnocentric individuals judge other groups relative to their own ethnic group or culture, especially with concern for language, behavior, customs, and religion. There are three main stages of ethnocentrism. First, denial, individual experience. Second, defense. Now, they're able to recognize that the difference between cultures, but in a way, they protect their own interests. Last, minimization. We are all human. Everyone is same. Ethno-relativism states that no one culture is superior to another. Recognize difference between cultures, believe in adapted and accommodate. Ethno-relativism is a belief based on deep and heartfelt respect for other cultures that all groups, cultures, or subcultures are inherently equal. Other cultures have been seen neither as better or worse, but as equal valid but different and complex. These ethnic distinctions and subdivisions serve to define each culture, ethnicity's unique cultural identity. We start by exploring the relationship between ethno-linguistic identity and culture using individual label data from various surveys such as the World Values Survey. We seek to explain answers on norms, values, and preferences using a respondent economic and demographic characteristics, and to evaluate the statistical significance of ethnic identity. According to William G. Sumner, ethnocentrism is defined as a technical name for the view of things, in which one's own group is the center of everything, and all others are scaled and rated with reference to it. He further characterized it as often leading to pride, vanity, beliefs of one's own group's superiority, and contempt of outsiders. William G. Sumner coined the term ethnocentrism. Upon observing the tendency for people to differentiate between the in-group and others, disseminating it in his 1906 work Folkways, a study of the sociological importance of usage, manners, customs, mores, and morals. In the study of anthropology, let's define anthropology. Anthropology is a systematic study of humanity with the goal of understanding our evolutionary origins, our distinctiveness as a species, and a great diversity in our forms of social existence across the world and through time. Ethnocentric are people born into a particular culture that grow up observing the values and behaviors of the culture. Will develop a worldview that considers their culture to be norm, standard. Despite how much humans have in common, cultural differences are far more prevalent than cultural universals. If people then experience other cultures that have different values and normal behaviors, they will find that the thought patterns appropriate to their birth culture are not appropriate for the new cultures. However, since people are accustomed to the birth culture, it can be difficult for them to see the behaviors of people from a different culture from the viewpoint of the culture rather than from their own. Examples of ethnocentrisms include religiocentric constructs claiming a divine association, like divine nation, one nation under God, God's own country, God's chosen people, and God's promised land. Let's define cultural relativism. It's a principle that an individual person's beliefs and activities should be understood by others in terms of that individual's own culture. Cultural relativism refers to not judging a culture to our own standards of what is right or wrong, strange or normal. Instead, we should try to understand cultural practices of other groups in its own cultural context. For example, instead of thinking fried crickets are disgusting, the goal of this is promote understanding of cultural practices that are not typically part of one's own culture. Using the perspective of cultural relativism lead to the view that no one culture is superior than another culture when compared to systems of morality, law, politics, and etc. It is a concept that cultural norms and values derive their meaning within a specific social context. This is also based on the idea that there is no absolute standard of good or evil. Therefore, every decision and judgment of what is right and wrong is individually decided into each society. It was established as accepted in anthropological research by Franz Boas in the first few decades of the 20th century and later popularized by his students. By studying this indigenous group, Boas introduced the theory of cultural relativism, which is the idea that all people have equally developed cultures. This theory also holds the belief that the difference between peoples were the result of historical, social, and geographic conditions. Cultural relativism was in part a response to Western ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism may take obvious forms, in which one consciously believes that one's people's art are the most beautiful, values the most virtuous, and believes the most truthful. Boas first articulated the idea in 1887. Civilization is not something absolute, but is relative, and our ideas and conceptions are true only so far as our salvation goes. However, Boas did not coin the term. Franz Boas, originally trained in physics and geography, argued that one's culture may mediate and thus limit one's perception in less obvious ways. He understood culture to include not only certain tastes in food, art, and music, or beliefs about religion. He assumed a much broader notion of culture defined as the totality of the mental and physical reactions and activities that characterize the behavior of the individuals composing a social group collectively and individually in relation to their natural environment, to the other groups, to members of the group itself, and of each individual to himself. This understanding of culture confronts anthropologists with two problems. First, how to escape the unconscious bonds of one's own culture, which inevitably bias our perceptions of and reaction to the world. And second, how to make sense of unfamiliar culture. Generalization. Ethnocentrism, the tendency to assume that one's own culture and way of life represent the norm or are superior to all others. Cultural relativism, the viewing of people's behavior from the perspective of their own culture. That's for today. Hope you've learned from it, and thanks for watching!